We are the great danger. Psyche is the great danger. It is demonstrated to us in our days what the power of psyche is, of man, how important it is to know something about it.
Some visions are gifts, others are warnings. Carl Jung knew that seeing what others cannot is a doorway, and not always a safe one. The mind that perceives hidden patterns, unseen currents, or lurking shadows begins to drift away from the ordinary world. Friends may scoff, reality may feel thin, and truth itself can feel like a trap. To notice what others ignore is to walk a tightrope between insight and obsession, between revelation and madness. Jung's caution wasn't about hiding knowledge, it was about surviving it when the world around you refuses to see what you see. The gift and the burden. There are moments when the world feels unusually heavy with meaning, when the ordinary hum of life suddenly seems layered with invisible threads. Some people catch these threads without effort, others stumble over them, blind. Carl Jung spoke of this as a gift, a perception beyond the surface, but he also warned of its shadow. For every insight there is a cost, subtle yet insistent, threading its way into the heart and mind of the one who sees too much. Imagine a seer in a small village, someone who notices the clouds shifting before a storm, or senses patterns in the river that hint at hidden danger. The villagers laugh at her warnings. They shake their heads and continue their daily routines. Her eyes are clear, her mind alert, yet she walks alone among laughter that does not reach her understanding. She knows truths that others cannot see, yet that clarity isolates her, builds a wall as delicate as mist but as unyielding as stone. To perceive beyond the ordinary is to live in a quiet solitude, a world layered over the familiar. Jung called part of this solitude the shadow, the side of ourselves that holds the unseen consequences of our awareness. It is not evil or darkness in a moral sense, but a reflection of the parts of life that insight exposes. Every revelation carries weight, every clarity can generate unease. The shadow exists in the tension between knowing and participating, between understanding hidden patterns and feeling the unspoken distance from those around you. Even in ordinary life, this shadow whispers. A person who notices subtle cues in behavior, who senses underlying tensions before words are spoken, may find that casual conversations feel shallow, that laughter sometimes masks confusion. The gift is waking before the rest of the world, seeing the unseen currents of emotion, thought, and consequence. The burden is that few can share the map you carry. The paths you walk are often private, marked only by the footprints of understanding few can follow. Every encounter with others becomes a subtle negotiation, a careful measurement of what can be shared and what must remain silent, shaping relationships in ways that are almost imperceptible. Awareness can be exhilarating. There is joy in grasping patterns, in seeing connections others miss. Yet every joy is tethered to the quiet ache of difference. The seer watches neighbours plant crops in lines that ignore the river's hidden flood paths. She sees the fissures in the village's foundation before they appear. She notes the unspoken grief in children who laugh too loudly. She knows what is coming, what might have been avoided, but speaking often changes nothing, and being silent carries its own weight. This is the paradox. Knowledge without consent from others is a lonely companion. Beneath the routine of daily life, a quiet pulse marks the subtle rhythm of this isolation. Some respond by retreating, moving inward into books, art, or meditation, seeking solace in inner landscapes that mirror their perception. Others attempt connection, only to find words failing, explanations unraveling, and eyes glazing over with polite incomprehension. Jung suggested that embracing the shadow is part of living fully with perception. To deny it is to risk being consumed by it, as if the awareness itself could fracture the self if left unchecked. And yet there is light in this state too. The seer glimpses beauty in patterns invisible to the casual observer, the curve of a branch that mirrors the river's flow, the way evening shadows stretch like gentle hands across fields, the resonance of a story whispered by an old tree. Insight allows a richer, fuller vision of the world, a depth of experience most will never touch. It is a dance on the knife edge between wonder and isolation, a delicate balance between what is seen and what must remain unshared. The gift and the burden are inseparable. To awaken to hidden truths is to step into a liminal space between clarity and alienation. Some call it loneliness, some call it destiny. Either way, the seer carries a map unseen by others, a vision whose paths wind through shadow as much as through light. As one steps forward with this awareness, the shadow grows subtle yet insistent, reminding the mind and heart that understanding the world is never without its hidden cost. The shadow of insight. The mind that perceives beyond the ordinary carries an echo, a constant hum of possibilities, dangers, and hidden truths. Jung called this confrontation with the unconscious a necessary journey, but not without cost. When you see what others do not, your awareness reaches into corners of the self and the world that most remain happily blind to. And sometimes, the shadows that emerge from this knowledge are more vivid than the light it brings. Consciousness is never truly neutral. To recognize patterns, to sense motives unspoken, to glimpse the layers beneath ordinary life, is to walk a fine line between clarity and unease. The heart feels heavier, the chest tighter, as moral questions emerge. What should be acted upon, and what must remain a secret? Each insight demands a choice. Every understanding carries consequences. You cannot escape the responsibility of knowing, even when the world around you remains unaware. In some quiet hours, the mind becomes a mirror of unseen forces, reflecting fears, desires, and instincts long buried. The struggle is internal, invisible to others, yet profound. Eastern philosophy frames this tension as the interplay of yin and yang. Light exists only in relation to shadow. Clarity depends on darkness. Awareness that pierces illusions brings both liberation and unease, a duality that must be lived with and acknowledged. Decisions become a delicate dance. One might know when a friend's intentions are not as they appear, or when a situation hides danger beneath smiles and routine. Acting on these truths risks alienation. Ignoring them risks inner torment. Jung warned that the unconscious will not remain silent. It nudges, it whispers, it insists. Avoidance does not free the mind. It intensifies the shadow, turning subtle insight into restless obsession. Emotions are coloured by this hidden knowledge. Joy and sorrow mingle in unexpected ways. Moments of laughter can carry a strange undercurrent, a sense of distance from those who cannot see what you see. Inner turmoil often arises not from mistakes, but from understanding consequences invisible to others. A visionary may feel the weight of responsibility for the unacknowledged currents around them, as if their perception alone is a lens through which the world's subtle crises are magnified. Sleep offers little respite. Dreams are sharper, layered with symbols and warnings. Patterns appear in ways that cannot be explained to anyone else. Here too, yin and yang whisper. The same insight that illuminates may also haunt, turning nighttime into a gallery of the mind's hidden realities. Jungian psychology suggests that these confrontations are necessary for growth, yet they are taxing. Each night spent navigating unseen depths strengthens the self, but also reminds the individual that perception is never purely benign. Relationships fray in quiet ways. A conversation that seems ordinary may feel fraught, as the visionary anticipates undercurrents invisible to the other party. Trust becomes complicated. Silence becomes a tool and a shield. The cost of self-awareness extends beyond the self. It shapes interactions, subtly altering how others are seen and engaged with. Sometimes it is isolation that protects the mind. Other times, it is the only path that allows insight to persist without distortion. The visionary may also notice how group dynamics bend subtly around their presence, as if others unconsciously adjust to their awareness. Moments of shared joy can feel tinged with sorrow, coloured by unspoken truths. And over time, this constant attunement to hidden currents can create a quiet vigilance, an alertness that never fully rests, shaping both perception and behaviour in ways invisible to everyone else. Despite it all, a strange beauty lingers within this tension. The shadow of insight is not punishment, it is the necessary counterbalance to vision. The mind becomes a living paradox, a space where darkness and light coexist, shaping awareness into something richer and more resilient. To live with perception is to live with duality, to embrace the delicate balance between clarity and disquiet, knowing that both are essential to the journey ahead. This constant negotiation between illumination and unease teaches patience, discernment, and a quiet courage that only those who walk the path of insight can truly understand. The mind, carrying both illumination and unease, begins to shape the way one moves through the world, hinting that the solitude of insight is as much a social reality as a personal experience. Walking alone among the many. Some people move through crowds yet feel as though they inhabit an invisible bubble, a separation that is felt but cannot be explained. It is not a lack of connection, but a different wavelength. The visionary sees patterns in behaviour, traces of intention, and undercurrents in conversation that most cannot perceive. These subtle truths are rarely acknowledged, and over time the mind begins to weigh them against the responses of those who cannot see the same realities. History is full of such figures. Nikola Tesla walked among peers and patrons, speaking of forces and inventions that stretched beyond contemporary understanding. Hypatia lectured on mathematics and philosophy, while navigating a society that neither fully grasped nor valued her insight. Both were brilliant, both misunderstood, both endured the quiet burden of social alienation. Their solitude was not chosen lightly. It was a byproduct of perception that set them apart, a protective space in which ideas could flourish without distortion. Isolation is not merely physical, it is woven into the very texture of interaction. The visionary may smile, laugh, and engage, yet a subtle distance persists. Ordinary conversation can feel like a shallow river beside the deeper currents that ripple below. Friends and family may sense it without understanding, and misinterpretation can generate tension. The unspoken knowledge of what is hidden in plain sight subtly reshapes relationships, creating a quiet loneliness that is impossible to articulate fully. Mystic traditions have long recognized the necessity of solitude for clarity. Monks, sages, and hermits withdraw not out of disdain for others, but to cultivate perception undisturbed by ordinary chatter. They understand that the mind must sometimes dwell in stillness, to grasp patterns unseen, to hear the whispers of intuition without interference. For those who perceive beyond the ordinary, the social world is often an echo chamber of misunderstanding, and distance becomes both shield and sanctuary. Within isolation, a paradox quietly unfolds. Too much separation risks hardening the heart, turning insight into arrogance or obsession. Too little invites confusion, as perceptions collide with disbelief or skepticism. The balance is delicate. Walking alone is not just a social reality, it is a practice, a conscious choice to protect awareness while remaining tethered to the human world. The challenge lies in navigating these invisible currents with patience, discretion, and self-compassion. Everyday interactions become exercises in subtle negotiation. A visionary may adjust words, tone, or gestures, sensing how others perceive, or fail to perceive, the truths they carry. Humour and empathy become tools for bridging worlds that rarely align. Yet the mind is constantly aware of the gap, the space where understanding is absent, where ordinary perception cannot follow. This persistent awareness shapes behaviour, sometimes creating gentle tension, sometimes profound estrangement. The quiet of solitude is both burden and gift. Alone, the visionary can explore ideas without interruption, test insights against observation, and cultivate a deep, intuitive clarity. Social life, however, remains unavoidable. Responsibilities, relationships, and communal expectations pull at the edges of isolation, creating friction that reminds the individual that perception is always relational. The shadow of insight manifests not only inwardly but outwardly, in the way the world reacts to unshared understanding. Sometimes, the visionary senses unspoken envy or subtle resistance from those around them, a reflection of discomfort provoked by uncommon awareness. Everyday gestures, once neutral, can feel weighted with misunderstanding or misjudgment. Even casual gatherings carry an invisible tension, as if others instinctively sense the depth that they cannot enter, leaving the visionary both present and apart at the same time. Thus, the visionary learns to navigate between worlds, with one foot in the ordinary and the other following hidden patterns. Each choice, each interaction becomes a careful calibration, a silent measure of how much to reveal and how much to guard, shaping the invisible currents of influence around them. Every conversation, every glance, every interaction carries layers of meaning that others may never sense. Isolation becomes familiar, a companion that cushions perception while preserving the mind's ability to see clearly. Yet this solitude also whispers a warning. The ripples of unseen awareness extend beyond the self, touching the social fabric in ways subtle but undeniable, hinting at larger patterns yet to be. Understood. These patterns linger, shaping interactions in quiet, almost imperceptible ways, as though the world itself reflects the consequences of insight before anyone else can recognize them. The mirror of others. What you perceive in isolation is sometimes more than your own truth. It reveals what others overlook or deny. Personal insight can act as a mirror, revealing the blind spots that society carries collectively. The visionary notices tensions unspoken, injustices ignored or desires repressed, and in doing so becomes both observer and participant in a subtle, invisible dialogue with the world. Psychology has long explored this dynamic. Studies on projection suggest that what we perceive in others often reflects both their hidden selves and our own. When a visionary observes patterns unseen by the majority, those observations are shaped not only by the world itself, but by the interplay of self-awareness and unconscious influence. Insight interacts with society in ways that ripple outward quietly. An intuitive remark here, a choice made there, influencing behavior even when no explanation is offered. In many African traditions, clarity of perception is never purely individual. The belief in communal vision holds that one person's awareness contributes to the consciousness of the group. A single insight can guide others, even indirectly, helping the collective navigate complexities invisible to ordinary perception. For the visionary, this creates both responsibility and tension. Every revelation carries the potential to illuminate or unsettle, depending on how it is expressed and received. In subtle ways, patterns start to take shape. Someone who senses injustice or imbalance may notice micro-expressions, hesitant words, or shifts in tone that reveal underlying dynamics. They perceive what is missing, the truths that no one speaks aloud. These patterns exist everywhere, at home, in the workplace, in social gatherings. The visionary may also notice the unspoken agreements that govern collective behavior, the subtle rules no one names but everyone follows. In gatherings, certain topics are avoided, emotions carefully contained, and tensions left unresolved. Awareness of these silent structures brings a peculiar responsibility: how to act without shattering the delicate equilibrium, how to guide insight into understanding rather than conflict. At the same time, perception allows for creative influence. Small interventions, a question asked at the right moment, an observation shared with humility, can awaken awareness in others without confrontation. Over time, these gentle nudges accumulate, shaping the collective consciousness in ways that remain almost invisible. The visionary learns that power often lies in restraint, in subtlety, and in knowing when to observe rather than act. The mirror is often uncomfortable. People rarely like to see what has been hidden, whether in themselves or in their society. The visionary's observations may expose fears, insecurities, or unacknowledged truths, and reactions can range from denial to deflection to quiet resentment. The social cost of insight becomes apparent. Even when perception is accurate, it does not guarantee acceptance. Instead, it requires careful navigation, as though one were moving through a field of fragile mirrors, each reflection capable of startling or reshaping those around you. Even so, this reflection holds its own beauty. By noticing what others miss, the visionary fosters awareness, empathy, and subtle guidance. A word spoken with care, a gesture made with intention, or even the act of remaining silent while holding insight can influence others more than confrontation. The interplay between perception and society is a living network, delicate and complex, where clarity can ripple quietly yet profoundly. These ripples are often imperceptible at first, but over time they shape attitudes, decisions, and even cultural norms in ways the visionary can only glimpse. The responsibility lies in choosing which currents to follow, which to redirect, and which to leave undisturbed, a constant calibration between insight and restraint. Far beyond the immediate, the visionary sometimes sees unfolding patterns. Cultural habits, social norms, and collective fears appear in small gestures repeated across communities. Awareness of these patterns is both illuminating and precarious. If mismanaged, it can isolate. If ignored, it can distort understanding. Insight becomes a responsibility that cannot be ignored, a subtle influence that demands balance between action and restraint. Therefore, the way others reflect is never fixed. It reflects, absorbs, and interacts with both self and society, reminding the visionary that perception is relational. Each observation is a thread in a broader tapestry, a signal that individual awareness is always intertwined with collective consciousness, shaping the world in ways that are felt long before they are named. These reflections linger in the margins of everyday life, hinting that the clarity one carries must always be guided with care and awareness. Navigating the unseen. Perception beyond the ordinary can be exhilarating, but it carries weight. To move through life with heightened awareness is to confront the unseen at every turn, hidden currents in conversations, subtle shifts in mood, patterns that ripple beneath the surface of events. Without a method to integrate these insights, the mind can become overwhelmed, like a vessel filling faster than it can drain. The first step, then, is recognition, acknowledging personal limits without judgment, understanding that even clarity has boundaries. Active imagination, as Jung described, is one tool for processing visions safely. It allows the mind to dialogue with the unconscious, giving form to insights and patterns that might otherwise remain fragmented or confusing. By visualizing interactions, exploring symbols, or even enacting scenarios internally, the visionary can engage with their perceptions without being carried away by them. These exercises turn intuition into understanding, transforming flashes of awareness into coherent insight that can be approached with calm rather than anxiety. Meditation offers another pathway. Eastern practices, such as focused breathwork or mindful observation, teach the mind to anchor itself amid swirling awareness. When perception stretches outward, scanning environments for hidden dynamics, the breath can act as a tether, a gentle reminder that the self is grounded in the present moment. Through regular practice, the visionary cultivates both patience and discernment, learning to observe without reacting impulsively, to notice without absorbing every emotional ripple. Boundaries are essential. Just as a river overflows if unchecked, so too can the mind saturate itself in unseen currents. Recognizing when to step back, when to withdraw into reflection, writing, or quiet observation is a subtle form of self-care. It is not avoidance, it is stewardship of awareness. The visionary learns that insight is a resource, not a burden to be carried recklessly, and that pacing is as vital as perception itself. Setting these boundaries also teaches the mind to distinguish between urgent signals and background noise, allowing perception to remain sharp without being overwhelmed. Integration is also relational. Awareness interacts with society, as seen in the previous chapter, and must be handled with care. Insight can inform decisions, guide communication, or illuminate hidden dynamics in relationships, but only when tempered with empathy. Sharing truths without calibration can provoke misunderstanding or resistance. Learning when to observe silently, when to speak, and when to act becomes an art, a practice of subtle influence that respects both the visionary and the world around them. This relational awareness also teaches humility, reminding the visionary that perception is only one lens among many, and that understanding grows when tempered with patience and respect for the unseen perspectives of others. Reflection is a continuous process. Journaling, dialogue with trusted confidants, or revisiting symbols through active imagination allows insights to settle gradually. The mind begins to discern patterns without forcing them into immediate conclusions. Over time, a rhythm develops. Observe, process, reflect, and integrate. Each step reinforces the other, creating a cycle that strengthens awareness without allowing it to dominate or distort ordinary life. Transformative potential exists even in the most ordinary everyday practices. Pausing to notice a fleeting emotion in oneself, attending to subtle changes in the environment, or gently exploring a recurring dream, all these acts ground perception in reality while honoring its expansiveness. Mindfulness does not dull insight, it organizes it. It gives structure to awareness, allowing the visionary to navigate the unseen without becoming untethered. There is also an ethical dimension. Heightened perception is not merely personal, it interacts with others, subtly influencing collective experience. A calm, grounded response to awareness sends signals that ripple outward. Conversely, acting impulsively on unchecked insight can provoke ripple effects that are harmful or misunderstood. The visionary learns that perception must be integrated not only internally, but socially. weaving insight into life in ways that are constructive rather than disruptive. Navigating the unseen becomes a practice of balance, or continuous negotiation between illumination and restraint, between internal clarity and external interaction. Each moment of awareness is paired with reflection, each insight tempered by patience. The goal is not perfection, nor is it complete control. It is steadiness, a cultivated presence that allows perception to enrich life rather than overwhelm it. Shadows often accompany even the brightest insights, and the mind must learn to navigate them. The quiet danger. Though awareness is a gift, without care it can gradually transform into obsession. The mind that notices too much, too often, risks turning insight into fixation. Patterns that were once illuminating begin to dominate thought, subtle currents become compulsions, and the distinction between perception and projection blurs. This is the quiet danger, the point at which visionary clarity becomes a trap of its own making. History offers cautionary tales. Some mystics and scholars, brilliant in their understanding, slipped into isolation and instability. They saw truths their contemporaries could not, yet without a framework to integrate these insights. Their minds grew fragile under the weight of knowledge. Their visions, once vibrant and guiding, became sources of fear and alienation, leaving them misunderstood, sometimes even discarded by the very societies they sought to enlighten. The eye that sees too much is an obscure metaphor found in ancient texts, a warning against unchecked perception. It speaks of awareness so sharp that it pierces both the world and the self, exposing layers of reality that can overwhelm without restraint. Those who ignore boundaries, who fail to process what they see, risk being consumed by the very clarity they sought to cultivate. The eye becomes a mirror turned inward, reflecting anxieties, hidden desires, and unresolved conflicts until the visionary struggles to distinguish inner reality from external truth. The impact grows stronger in isolation. Even a subtle disconnection from ordinary life can magnify obsession. Social feedback, which normally grounds perception, is muted or absent. The visionary walks in a world that seems increasingly unreal, seeing patterns that others cannot, interpreting signs that may not exist, and clinging to meaning where context is missing. Without careful reflection, the mind starts to fold in on itself, creating narratives that may be compelling internally, but destabilizing externally. In subtle ways, the visionary may experience distortions in memory and perception. Events can take on disproportionate significance, and small coincidences may appear as major signs. These distortions are rarely obvious at first, creeping in like shadows along the edges of consciousness, slowly altering the interpretation of both past and present. Creative work and problem solving, once sources of joy and clarity, can become entangled with obsession. The mind generates endless possibilities, each demanding attention, each competing for recognition. What was once a productive engagement with insight can turn into an exhausting cycle, where imagination feeds rumination, and rumination feeds isolation. The body too shows the effects of the strain. Sleepless nights, tension, and somatic anxiety often accompany unchecked awareness. The nervous system, constantly alert to unseen currents, exhausts itself. Physical fatigue compounds mental strain, reinforcing a feedback loop where perception becomes both sharper and more destabilizing at the same time. Within this state, emotions are amplified. Joy and fear intertwine, hope and anxiety coexist in tension, and ordinary events can trigger intense reactions. The visionary may find themselves caught in cycles of rumination, endlessly tracing cause and effect, anticipating consequences, and revisiting insights without pause. The line between constructive reflection and destructive fixation becomes perilously thin. Misinterpretation is another hazard. The more one perceives, the more one assumes patterns and intentions in others. Signals may be misread, gestures overanalyzed, and events imbued with significance beyond their context. Relationships suffer, trust frays, and social isolation deepens. Even kindness or support can be interpreted through the lens of obsession, reinforcing the sense of difference and fueling further withdrawal. Physical and mental fatigue often follow. The constant engagement with hidden currents drains energy, making concentration, sleep, and emotional regulation more difficult. ancient and modern traditions alike warn that extraordinary insight carries a price if not balanced by grounding practices, rest, and community. Without these, the visionary risks spiraling into distress, trapped between knowing too much and acting too little. Danger, however, is not certain. Awareness of the risk, combined with deliberate practice, allows perception to remain illuminating rather than destructive. Boundaries, reflection, and disciplined engagement with insights can channel extraordinary vision into wisdom rather than fixation. The mind learns to navigate unseen currents with care, transforming potential peril into a source of subtle guidance for both self and society. When vision threatens to extend too far, quiet danger serves as a reminder that restraint is as vital as insight. Integration and continuance. Insight alone is fragile. Without a bridge to ordinary life, perception risks fracturing into obsession, isolation, or misinterpretation. Integration begins when the visionary learns to anchor awareness in daily reality, allowing extraordinary vision to coexist with ordinary experience. Like a river that winds through varied landscapes before merging with the sea, perception finds its fullness not in solitude but in connection, in the harmonization of inner clarity with the world around it. Jung's concept of individuation provides a framework for this process. It is the journey toward wholeness, a delicate balancing of conscious awareness, unconscious insight, and lived experience. The visionary is encouraged to explore hidden aspects of the self while maintaining touch with external reality, turning perception into wisdom rather than distraction. Individuation is not a destination, but a continuous path where inner vision gradually aligns with actions, relationships, and responsibilities, creating coherence across mind, heart, and life. Boundaries remain essential, even in integration. Awareness must be tempered with discernment, reflection, and mindfulness. Without these, the mind risks reverting to patterns of overabsorption or compulsive insight. The practice of integration involves pacing perception, testing it against reality, and learning to navigate social and personal contexts with clarity. It is a negotiation between internal vision and external circumstance, a dance between revelation and restraint. Parables have long illustrated this journey. One tells of a river that meets the sea. Alone, it is energetic and restless, swirling with currents visible only to the careful observer. When it merges with the ocean, its energy is transformed, its path broadened, its influence multiplied. Integration is this merging. The individual's perception becomes part of a larger flow, shaping life in subtle, far-reaching ways. Integration also involves embracing the shadow. Jung emphasized that the unconscious contains both gifts and hidden aspects of the self that, when ignored, can distort perception. By acknowledging these parts, the visionary allows their insight to be tempered with humility and self-awareness, preventing overreach or self-deception. Awareness becomes both expansive and grounded, as light and shadow inform one another in a continuous dialogue. Community plays a subtle but crucial role. Even the most introspective visionary benefits from connection with others who offer feedback, perspective, or simply presence. Shared experiences and attentive listening provide a mirror for self-understanding, revealing blind spots that solitary reflection alone cannot illuminate. Integration is not isolation. It is the interplay between personal insight and relational grounding. Time, patience, and repetition solidify the process. Individuation and harmonization are not instantaneous achievements. They unfold gradually, like sediment forming the riverbed that guides the current. Small, consistent practices, journaling, mindful observation, active imagination, intentional conversation, allow insight to permeate daily life organically. Over time, perception becomes both natural and steady, a quiet compass guiding thought, emotion, and action. As a tool, reflection fosters harmonization. Journaling, dialogue, meditation, and active imagination provide space for insights to settle, allowing the visionary to process what is seen and felt. Each insight gains clarity as it is tested against experience, reshaped through reflection, and absorbed into the practical rhythms of life. Over time, this repeated practice transforms perception from a sporadic gift into a steady, reliable guide. Integration also nurtures empathy. When perception is balanced with lived reality, the visionary learns to see both hidden truths and ordinary perspectives simultaneously. Relationships deepen, communication becomes intuitive, and subtle influence can be exerted without overwhelming others. Insight becomes relational rather than isolating, an internal resource that enriches the external world rather than destabilizing it. Practical decisions also experience positive effects. Choices regarding work, creativity, and personal relationships are informed not only by rational analysis, but by an attuned sense of unseen dynamics. Awareness no longer isolates, it guides. The visionary discovers that integration is not passive. It is an active engagement with life that transforms perception into action, imagination into expression, and clarity into wisdom. In this way, insight, once woven into the fabric of daily life, reaches its full effect. The gift of perception, once isolated and precarious, is now a living dynamic force. It flows through experience, shapes decisions, and resonates quietly in both self and society. Finding its rhythm with the sea, the river does not forfeit its nature. Instead, it attains a depth and reach previously beyond imagining, suggesting the next stage of understanding. Living with unseen realities. Never static is the perception that stretches beyond the ordinary. Those who notice what others overlook move through life with a fluid awareness, sensing shifts in emotion, intention, and circumstance that remain hidden to most. This heightened vision is not a trophy or a final destination. It is an ongoing dialogue with reality itself, a call to presence, patience, and subtle discernment. Each moment carries its own subtle instructions, often missed by those who move too quickly or too confidently through life. Eastern philosophy teaches the value of the ever-flowing present. Awareness is not something to seize and hold, but to engage with continuously, moment by moment. Each instant offers fresh patterns, new insight, and shifting dynamics. The visionary learns to navigate these currents without grasping too tightly, to flow alongside reality rather than attempting to control it. Even small actions, a pause before speaking, a glance that registers nuance, a mindful step through routine tasks, become opportunities to harmonize perception with experience. Guidance can appear in unexpected forms. A parable tells of a hidden lantern carried by a wanderer through dense fog. Its light is not powerful, but it is enough to illuminate the next step, revealing small truths while leaving the horizon mysterious. Those with extraordinary perception often carry their own lanterns, subtle beacons that offer clarity just where it is needed, without dispelling the wonder or uncertainty of the unknown. Some days the lantern flickers, uncertain in its glow, yet even dim light prevents missteps in the dark, and each moment illuminated builds confidence for the next. Humility remains essential. Knowledge alone does not grant understanding, and seeing beyond the surface requires a willingness to be corrected, to relearn, and to accept that vision is always partial. The journey is continuous. Each insight carries new questions, each observation unfolds into further reflection. Heightened awareness thrives not in certainty but in curiosity, guided by both restraint and openness. The visionary learns to accept what cannot yet be seen, to tolerate ambiguity, and to trust that clarity will arrive in its own time. Every day life becomes a laboratory for perception. The visionary learns to observe interactions, environments, and internal responses with gentle attention. Small moments, a glance, a shift in tone, a fleeting image in thought or dream, become teachers. Practice in these subtle arenas reinforces insight while grounding it, ensuring that perception enriches life rather than overwhelming it. Even routine encounters, a conversation with a neighbour, a walk through a familiar street, the silence of a morning cup of tea, offer lessons in presence, reflection, and careful observation. In these ordinary moments, the visionary discovers that the unseen can guide decisions as much as it illuminates mysteries, bridging insight with practical living. Connection with others sustains the journey. Even solitary vision benefits from shared experience, dialogue, and mutual reflection. Insights, when reflected in relationships, help clarify patterns and illuminate unseen dynamics. Community does not dilute perception. It provides a mirror, a way to test and refine understanding while nurturing empathy. Historical examples abound. Mystics, philosophers, and artists who shared glimpses of the unseen found that thoughtful exchange strengthened their vision and prevented it from turning inward destructively. The process of living with unseen realities is ongoing. Integration, reflection, mindfulness, and dialogue are repeated in cycles that never fully end, like waves touching the shore again and again. There is no final mastery, only attentive presence, subtle guidance, and a steady unfolding of insight that harmonizes inner vision with the currents of life. Mistakes, misinterpretations, and moments of doubt are all part of the rhythm, teaching resilience and reinforcing the necessity of balance between perception and ordinary living. Though the future remains uncertain, a quiet confidence lives in those who perceive differently. They understand that the journey is measured less by triumph and more by the capacity to remain attentive, adaptable, and humble. Each day offers a new opportunity to balance awareness with action, to let insight serve life without being a burden. In this way, perception becomes a practice, not a possession, and living consciously transforms the unseen into a subtle guide rather than a source of anxiety. Remaining both hidden and present, the lantern casts a gentle light through the ongoing flow, guiding subtly and illuminating without overwhelming. Thank you for watching. If this sparked something within, hit subscribe and let me know your reflections.